I never expected to find my boss, the woman who'd made my life hell for 3 years, sobbing on my doorstep at 2 in the morning with mascara streaking down her face. But what happened the next morning would change both our lives forever. Ryan Mitchell stared at his phone, thumb hovering over the decline button. The screen glowed in the dim kitchen light of his Queens apartment, casting shadows across the worn laminate countertops. 11 o'clock on a Friday night, and Diane Harper was calling for the 5th time in 20 minutes. The CEO of Harper & Associates Marketing, his boss, the woman who'd spent the better part of 3 years making him question whether he was cut out for this industry at all. Emma looked up from her coloring book spread across the coffee table, her 8-year-old face scrunched with concern. Brown curls fell across her forehead, and she pushed them back with fingers stained purple from marker ink. "Daddy, who keeps calling?" The phone stopped ringing. Ryan set it face down on the counter, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack his face in half. "Just work, sweetheart. Nothing important." The lie tasted bitter. Nothing about Diane Harper was unimportant. She made sure everyone knew that. 3 years under her management had taught Ryan that lesson 100 times over. The late nights she demanded without warning. The weekend emails requiring responses within the hour. The way she'd look right through him in meetings as if he were just another piece of office furniture, only acknowledging his existence when she needed someone to criticize. The phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, a text message. Ryan picked it up, already composing the polite refusal in his head. Whatever Diane needed could wait until Monday morning when he'd be back at his desk, playing the role of the reliable creative director who never complained and always delivered. The message stopped him cold. "Please help. I'm in trouble." DH, Ryan read it twice. 3 times, the word please felt foreign coming from Diane Harper. In 3 years, he couldn't recall her ever using it. Not when assigning projects. Not when demanding revisions. Not when denying his request for flexible hours so he could attend Emma's school events. Diane Harper didn't ask. She commanded, expected, required. The corporate world bent to her will because she'd built an empire through sheer force of personality and an MBA from Wharton that she wielded like a weapon in board meetings. Emma had gone back to her coloring, filling in a butterfly with careful strokes. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city beyond their windows. Car horns, sirens, the constant pulse of New York that never quite faded even here in Woodside. Ryan thought about his father. Dead 7 years now, but his voice still echoed in Ryan's head at moments like this. "Character is measured by how you treat people who can't do anything for you, son." The old man had said it 1,000 times, usually while helping a neighbor fix a leaky faucet or giving someone a ride to the hospital. He'd been a mechanic in the Bronx, hands perpetually stained with grease, but he'd taught Ryan more about being a man than any business school ever could. The phone remained silent in his palm. Whatever trouble Diane had gotten herself into, it wasn't his problem. He'd given her 3 years of his life, 3 years of missed bedtimes, canceled plans, and a perpetual knot of anxiety in his chest every time her name appeared on his screen. Tonight was supposed to be his. One of the few Friday evenings when Emma didn't have a sleepover or activity, when they could just exist together in their small 2-bedroom sanctuary. He'd planned to work on the children's book he'd been writing for Emma's birthday, a project now 2 years in the making because there were never enough hours in the day. "Daddy?" He looked up. Emma was watching him with those dark eyes that saw too much, too perceptive for 8 years old. It was a quality her mother had never possessed. Rachel, who'd walked out 3 years ago claiming she wasn't cut out for motherhood and needed to find herself. Last Ryan heard, she was in Portland or Seattle or somewhere on the West Coast, posting pictures of mountain hikes and farmers markets on social media while their daughter asked fewer and fewer questions about when mommy was coming home. "Is something wrong?" Ryan crossed to the couch and sat beside her, the cushions sagging under his weight. The furniture had come from a thrift store in Astoria, mismatched and worn but comfortable. Home. "Someone needs help, that's all." Emma tilted her head, marker pausing mid-stroke. "The Dragon Lady." Heat flooded Ryan's face. He'd been so careful never to badmouth his boss in front of Emma. So careful to keep his work frustrations locked behind closed doors and forced smiles. But apparently the walls were thinner than he'd thought. Or maybe she'd overheard conversations at the office during the rare occasions he'd had to bring her in during school breaks. Where did you hear that? Emma shrugged with the casual honesty of childhood. Miss Sarah at your work. She was talking to another lady in the bathroom. I heard them call her that. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Is she the one who makes you sad? The marker had left a purple smudge on her cheek. Ryan reached out and wiped it away with his thumb, buying time to formulate an answer that wouldn't be a lie, but wouldn't burden his daughter with adult complexities she shouldn't have to carry. Yes, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean she doesn't deserve help when she needs it. Even if she's mean? Especially then, your grandfather used to tell me that sometimes the people who are hardest to be kind to are the ones who need kindness most. Emma considered this with a seriousness that made Ryan's chest ache. She was growing up too fast, shaped by circumstances no child should have to navigate. Single-parent household, absent mother, father who worked too much and worried constantly about money, about the future, about whether he was enough. The phone buzzed in his hand, another text. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. Ryan stood and walked back to the kitchen, creating distance between himself and Emma's questioning gaze. Through the window, he could see into the apartments across the narrow courtyard. Mrs. Patterson's lights were still on, the 70-year-old widow who lived next door and had become something like family over the past few years. She'd watched Emma during emergencies, brought over soup when they were sick, never asked for anything in return except company and conversation. He pulled up her number and hit call before he could reconsider. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and unhurried. Ryan, dear, bit late for a social call. Agnes, I'm so sorry to bother you. I know it's late, but could you possibly watch Emma for a few hours? Someone at work is in trouble and I need to help. I'll be back before midnight, but just in case. Say no more. Give me 5 minutes to put on proper clothes and I'll be right over. The relief that washed through him was disproportionate to the situation. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was exactly what desperation felt like. The slow dissolution of boundaries between personal and professional, between what he owed himself and what he owed to another human being, even one who'd never shown him an ounce of mercy. Emma had abandoned the coloring book and was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed in an unconscious imitation of the way Ryan stood when he was worried. You're going to help her? The dragon lady? Her name is Ms. Harper, and yes, Mrs. Patterson is going to come stay with you for a little while. Is she in danger? The question caught Ryan off guard. At 8 years old, Emma's understanding of the world was still forming, still full of fairy tale logic where dragons could be slain and princesses rescued. But there was something ancient in her eyes as she asked, some inherited knowledge of how complicated real life could be, how people rarely fit into neat categories of good and evil. I don't know, sweetheart, but I need to find out. Mrs. Patterson arrived wearing a purple cardigan and carrying a worn paperback. She hugged Emma, whispered something that made the girl giggle, then turned to Ryan with an expression that managed to be both understanding and faintly disapproving. You're a good man, Ryan Mitchell. Too good for your own peace of mind sometimes. He grabbed his keys and wallet, pulled on the jacket hanging by the door, a navy windbreaker that had seen better days but was warm enough for late September nights. If I'm not back by midnight, Emma's already in her pajamas. She can stay up until 10 reading, but that's the limit. We'll be fine. You just be careful. The city's a different place after dark. Ryan kissed Emma's forehead, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo. I love you, kiddo. Be good for Mrs. Patterson. I always am. And Daddy? Emma's voice stopped him at the door. Even if she's a dragon lady, maybe she just needs someone to be nice to her. Like in the book we read, the one about the lonely dragon who terrorized a village because no one had ever tried to be its friend. Ryan had read it to her a dozen times, never imagining his daughter would extract life lessons applicable to his nightmare boss. Maybe you're right, Em. Maybe you're right. The subway from Woodside to Manhattan took 45 minutes. Ryan descended into the fluorescent glow of the platform, surrounded by the late-night crowd, young people heading to bars in the city, service workers ending their shifts, everyone existing in their own bubble of purpose and destination. The train arrived with a screech of brakes and a blast of warm, stale air from the tunnel. Ryan found a seat near the doors and pulled out his phone. The address Diane had finally sent was on the Upper East Side, a part of Manhattan that might as well have been a different country from his Queens neighborhood. Velvet Lounge. He looked it up. One of those upscale bars where clients close deals over $30 cocktails, and the dress code probably excluded his entire wardrobe. The kind of place Diane Harper belonged, even on her worst day. The kind of place where Ryan would stick out like a construction worker at an opera house. The train rattled through the darkness beneath the city, stations blurring past. Ryan closed his eyes and let the motion rock him into something like meditation. His mind wandered to Monday morning, the promotion review that was supposed to happen next week. 3 years as creative director, producing award-winning campaigns, mentoring junior staff, taking on increasingly complex accounts. By any objective measure, he'd earned the bump to senior creative director. The salary increase alone would be life-changing, enough to move to a better neighborhood, maybe even start a college fund for Emma that wasn't pathetically underfunded. But Diane would be the one making the final call. Diane, who'd already passed him over twice in favor of external candidates with shinier resumes and the right pedigree. Diane, who seemed to view Ryan's devotion to his daughter as a character flaw rather than a strength. She'd said it explicitly during his last review, voice crisp and clinical. Creative work doesn't respect personal schedules, Mitchell. If you can't commit fully to this role, perhaps it's not the right fit. The train emerged from the tunnel onto elevated tracks, giving Ryan a view of the city spreading in all directions, a constellation of lit windows representing millions of lives, millions of stories. Somewhere in that vast sprawl, Diane Harper was waiting for him to rescue her from whatever mess she'd created. The irony wasn't lost on him. After 3 years of her rescuing exactly nothing for him, denying every request for flexibility or understanding, he was rushing across the city at 11:30 on a Friday night because she'd said please in a text message. His father's voice again. Doing the right thing isn't conditional, son. It doesn't come with scorecards or expectations of reciprocity. You do it because that's who you are, not because of who they are. The train descended back underground. Ryan watched his reflection in the darkened window across from him, 35 years old, starting to show gray at the temples, wearing a windbreaker and jeans to rescue a CEO who probably spent more on a single pair of shoes than he spent on groceries in a month. The reflection looked tired, uncertain, but determined in the way only a single father could be, accustomed to doing hard things because there was no other choice. The Lexington Avenue stop came too quickly. Ryan emerged into the cool night air, immediately disoriented by the transformation from his neighborhood's lived-in chaos to this area's polished perfection. The buildings rose like glass and steel monuments to wealth, doormen stationed at every entrance like sentries guarding the gates of privilege. Even the sidewalks seemed cleaner here, as if the city's grime knew better than to settle where it wasn't welcome. Velvet Lounge occupied the ground floor of a building that probably had apartments above it, worth more than Ryan would earn in his entire lifetime. The exterior was all dark wood and frosted glass, with ambient lighting that suggested exclusivity without being overtly ostentatious. Through the windows, Ryan could see the carefully curated interior, leather booths, a marble bar, Edison bulbs hanging from exposed beams in a way that probably cost a fortune to look industrial. He pushed open the door. The noise hit him first. Conversations layered over smooth jazz from hidden speakers, the clink of glassware, laughter that sounded expensive. The air smelled like good whiskey and better cologne. Every person in the place looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about successful young professionals enjoying their well-earned prosperity. Ryan spotted Diane immediately, though she was almost unrecognizable from the woman who commanded boardrooms with icy precision. She sat alone at the bar, posture collapsed into something approximating defeat. The cream-colored blouse that probably cost a week of his salary was stained dark purple with wine, and her hair, usually pulled into a severe bun that gave her an additional 2 inches of height, fell in loose, messy waves around her shoulders. She was arguing with the bartender, a black man in his 40s who held her car keys just out of reach with an expression of professional patience. "I'm perfectly fine to drive. Do you know who I am? I could buy this entire establishment with a phone call." Her words slurred at the edges, confident authority undermined by impaired motor control. The bartender's name tag read Marcus, and he looked like he'd heard every possible variation of this conversation. "Ma'am, I've called you 3 taxis. I'm not giving you back your keys." That's not happening tonight. Ryan approached slowly, feeling every eye in the place assess and dismiss him in an instant. Too casual, too cheap, too out of place in this temple of affluence. Diane. She turned at the sound of his voice, and the expression that crossed her face was a complicated storm of emotions. Relief, shame, confusion, and something that might have been gratitude if Diane Harper were capable of such vulnerability. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup smudged into raccoon shadows. Mitchell? The question came out uncertain, as if she couldn't quite believe he'd actually come. Marcus looked between them with raised eyebrows. You know this woman? She's my boss. I'll make sure she gets home safely. Relief flooded the bartender's features. He set the keys on the bar between them like a peace offering. Thank God. She's been here since 6, refused every cab, refused to call anyone. I was about to call the cops. 6 o'clock, 5.5 hours of drinking, alone in a bar designed for networking and deal-making. Ryan had never seen Diane consume more than a single glass of wine at company events, and even then she nursed it for hours like it might betray her if she let her guard down. Whatever had driven her here to this was something catastrophic. Diane slid off the bar stool, legs unsteady. Ryan caught her elbow, and she didn't pull away. Up close, she smelled like expensive perfume and cheap wine, a combination that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did, the way contradictions often define Diane Harper's existence. I can't believe you came. Her voice was small, stripped of its usual commanding resonance. You said you needed help. As Ryan guided her toward the door, Marcus called out one more piece of information that sent cold dread trickling down his spine. Hey, Mr. Chen from Tech Vision was here earlier. Saw the whole thing. Looked pretty concerned before he left. Robert Chen, CEO of their largest client, responsible for an $8 million account that represented nearly 30% of Harper & Associates' annual revenue. Robert Chen had witnessed Diane drunk and belligerent in a public bar. The implications cascaded through Ryan's mind like falling dominoes. Lost accounts, damaged reputation, careers destroyed. Not just Diane's career, everyone's. The night air felt colder after the bar's warmth. Diane shivered, and Ryan shrugged out of his windbreaker, draping it over her shoulders. She looked at him with something approaching wonder, as if simple kindness were a language she'd forgotten how to understand. Where did you park? She gestured vaguely down the street. Ryan spotted his Honda Civic, a 15-year-old sedan held together by routine maintenance and hope, and guided her toward it. Getting her into the passenger seat required maneuvering that felt more intimate than anything should between a boss and employee, but there was nothing sexual about it. Just the awkward logistics of helping an incapacitated person maintain some shred of dignity while gravity and alcohol worked against them. The interior of his car was a stark reminder of their different worlds. Emma's booster seat occupied the back. Discarded fruit snack wrappers littered the floor. The stereo was broken, stuck on a local news station that Ryan couldn't afford to fix. Diane's designer handbag looked absurd sitting on the worn upholstery, like a diamond ring in a pawn shop. Ryan started the engine and pulled into traffic, heading further uptown toward the address Diane had mumbled. The silence between them felt heavy with things unsaid, years of tension and resentment compressed into the space of a 10-minute drive. Streetlights flickered past, painting Diane's face in alternating shadows and pale illumination. 3 blocks from the bar, she spoke. 5 years ago today, my mother. The words hung between them, naked and raw. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, giving her the mercy of not witnessing whatever expression accompanied that confession. I'm sorry. The inadequacy of the response felt crushing, but what else was there to tell? Death had its own vocabulary, and Ryan knew it too well. His father's heart attack had been sudden. One day dispensing wisdom over Sunday dinner, the next day gone. 7 years and the wound still ached like a fresh bruise when he poked it. Diane continued, words tumbling out with the unfiltered honesty of intoxication. She was everything to me. Raised me alone after my father left. Worked 3 jobs to send me to NYU. Taught me about kindness and empathy and all the things I've spent the last 5 years forgetting. A bitter laugh escaped her throat. After she died, I became this. Ryan glanced at her. Diane was staring out the window, watching the city blur past. She used to say that hardship either makes you bitter or better, and the choice is entirely yours. I chose wrong. Her voice cracked. I chose so wrong. They passed Central Park, its dark expanse of void in the city's bright grid. Ryan thought about Emma's question, whether even dragons deserve kindness. His daughter, with her 8 years of wisdom, had understood something Ryan had spent 3 years resenting. Diane Harper wasn't evil. She was wounded, and wounded people lashed out, created armor from ice and ambition, pushed away anyone who might get close enough to hurt them again. You didn't choose wrong. Ryan's voice surprised him with its gentleness. You survived. That's what we do when grief hits us. We survive however we can. Diane turned to look at him, mascara-streaked face illuminated by passing headlights. Why are you helping me, Mitchell, after everything I've done to make your life miserable? The question deserved honesty. Ryan pulled up to a red light, finally meeting her gaze. Because doing the right thing doesn't require a good reason, and because everyone deserves a second chance, no matter how badly they've screwed up. The light turned green. They drove in silence the rest of the way. Diane's building was exactly what Ryan expected. Pre-war architecture renovated into modern luxury, with a doorman in full uniform stationed behind glass doors. Carlos, according to his name tag, recognized Diane immediately despite her disheveled state. His expression shifted from professional neutrality to concern so quickly that Ryan understood this wasn't the first time Diane had come home in rough shape. Ms. Harper, everything all right? Ryan supported more of Diane's weight as they approached. She'd faded during the drive, adrenaline or alcohol or emotional exhaustion, finally catching up with her system. I'm helping her get upstairs safely. She had a difficult evening. Carlos held the door open, his eyes communicating understanding and discretion. These doormen saw everything, Ryan thought. Every affair, every breakdown, every moment when the successful exteriors cracked to reveal the messy humans underneath. They were witnesses to privilege's private moments, sworn to silence by paychecks and professional courtesy. The elevator's this way. Ms. Harper, you need anything from the desk? Diane shook her head, then seemed to regret the motion. Ryan guided her across the marble lobby, real marble, not the laminate version that lined his apartment building's hallway, and into an elevator that required a key card to operate. Diane fumbled in her purse until Ryan found it for her, sliding it into the reader. The doors closed with a mechanical whisper. 23rd floor. The elevator moved with expensive smoothness, no rattling or jerking like the ones in Ryan's building. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. Even the air smelled clean, filtered, and conditioned to optimal comfort. The doors opened directly into Diane's penthouse. No hallway, no shared space with neighbors, just her apartment, sprawling before them in a display of minimalist wealth that took Ryan's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan's glittering landscape. Everything was white, black, or chrome. Furniture that looked sculptural rather than comfortable. Abstract art on walls so white they seemed to glow. A kitchen that probably cost more than Ryan's annual salary with appliances he couldn't begin to identify. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end hotel suite. No personal photographs, no mementos, no indication that an actual human being with a history and relationships lived here. Just expensive emptiness, as cold and perfect as Diane's professional persona. Bathroom. Diane's voice was urgent, edged with nausea. Ryan guided her to what he hoped was the right door. She disappeared inside and he retreated to the kitchen, giving her privacy for whatever was happening. The refrigerator was a stainless steel monolith that probably had more computing power than his laptop. Inside, it was almost empty, a bottle of white wine, some mineral water, takeout containers that looked weeks old. The life of someone who ate at restaurants or didn't eat at all. Ryan found a glass in a cabinet organized with military precision and filled it with water from the tap. As he closed the cabinet, he noticed the refrigerator's surface, bare except for a single photograph held by a magnet. The picture showed a younger Diane, maybe early 20s, with an older woman who shared her features. Same dark hair, same bone structure, same intensity in the eyes. But both women were smiling in a way Ryan had never seen Diane smile at work. Open, joyful, the kind of expression that suggested happiness came naturally rather than as a carefully calculated professional gesture. That's my mother. Ryan turned. Diane stood into the bathroom doorway, looking marginally more composed. She'd washed her face, scrubbing away the mascara, and her hair was pulled back with a rubber band. Without makeup, she looked younger and older simultaneously, the fine lines around her eyes more visible, but the severe mask she wore at work temporarily absent. She died 5 years ago today. Lung cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Ryan set the glass on the counter, unsure whether to move closer or maintain the distance. I lost my dad 7 years ago, heart attack. He was 53. Ryan heard his own voice as if from a distance. Those anniversaries never get easier. You just get better at carrying them. Diane crossed to the refrigerator and stood before the photograph. Her hand reached out but didn't quite touch it, hovering in the air like she was afraid direct contact might shatter something fragile. She worked 3 jobs to put me through school. Receptionist in the mornings, cleaning office buildings in the afternoons, waitressing at night. Never complained, always smiled. Her voice carried the weight of confession. She taught me that kindness was strength, not weakness. That success meant nothing if you achieved it by stepping on people. Ryan handed her the water glass. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and neither pulled away immediately. A moment of human contact stripped of all the hierarchical complexity that usually defined their interactions. When she got sick, I watched her waste away for 2 years. Chemo, radiation, nothing helped. Every treatment just gave us false hope before ripping it away again. Diane's grip on the glass tightened. The last day, she held my hand and made me promise I'd find happiness again. Told me not to let her death turn me to stone. She looked at Ryan then, eyes glistening with tears that threatened to fall but didn't. I broke that promise the day they lowered her into the ground. I decided being hard would protect me from ever hurting that much again. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Instead, I became someone she wouldn't recognize. Someone who makes other people's lives harder because mine feels impossible. Before Ryan could respond, Diane's phone rang, the jarring intrusion of the outside world into this moment of raw vulnerability. She pulled it from her purse, and her face went pale even beneath the artificial kitchen lighting. Robert Chen. The words came out barely above a whisper. Ryan's stomach dropped. TechVision's CEO calling after midnight. Nothing good ever came from that combination. Don't answer it. Not like this. But Diane had already accepted the call, some instinct for damage control overriding common sense. She straightened her posture, and when she spoke, her voice carried almost no trace of the alcohol or emotional turmoil. Robert, what a pleasant surprise. Ryan could hear the anger in Chen's voice even without being on the call. Loud enough to carry across the kitchen, sharp enough to cut. Diane, I was at the Velvet Lounge tonight. I saw you. This is completely unacceptable behavior, especially after how you treated my team during our meeting today. We're seriously reconsidering our partnership with Harper & Associates. The professional mask crumbled. Diane's face contorted with panic, and whatever control she'd mustered evaporated under the weight of Chen's words. Her career, everything she'd sacrificed for, everything she'd built in the ashes of her grief, was disintegrating over a phone line. Robert, please. I can explain. Today was... Ryan crossed the kitchen and gently took the phone from her hand. She looked at him with an expression caught between gratitude and terror as he raised it to his ear. Mr. Chen, this is Ryan Mitchell, creative director at Harper & Associates. I apologize for interrupting. A pause on the other end. Chen's anger hadn't dissipated, but surprise had muted it. Mitchell, what are you doing there? Ms. Harper received devastating personal news today, the 5-year anniversary of her mother's death. She was attempting to process it privately, and I'm ensuring she gets home safely and has someone looking out for her welfare. Ryan kept his voice steady, professional, stripped of judgment or defensiveness. Just facts, delivered with the calm authority of someone who understood both human frailty and business necessity. I understand you have concerns about this afternoon's meeting and tonight's events. Perhaps we could schedule time Monday morning to discuss them. I'd also like to present some new campaign concepts we've been developing specifically for TechVision's Q4 push. Another pause. Longer this time. Ryan could almost hear Chen's mental recalculation, weighing anger against pragmatism, personal offense against business opportunity. Ryan, I've seen your work. You're talented. Frankly, I've been concerned about Diane's leadership style for some time. She's brilliant, but she drives people too hard. Chen's voice had softened fractionally. Maybe you and I should have a conversation about the account and other matters. The implications were clear. Chen was considering pulling not just the account, but recommending a change in Harper & Associates' leadership structure, recommending Ryan as a replacement, or at least as a buffer between Diane's intensity and client relationships. I'll be there Monday morning, Mr. Chen. 9 o'clock if that works for you, and sir? Ryan glanced at Diane, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Ms. Harper is an exceptional executive who's had an exceptionally difficult day. I hope you'll consider that when evaluating our partnership going forward. We'll talk Monday, Ryan. Take care of her. The line went dead. Ryan set the phone on the counter as carefully as if it were made of glass. Diane stared at him, tears flowing freely now, no longer restrained by professional necessity. You just saved my career. Her voice broke on the last word. After everything I've done to you, after I denied you time with your daughter, passed you over for promotions, made you feel like nothing, you saved me. Ryan shrugged, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the rescue and crisis management was draining away, leaving only the bone-deep tiredness of a single father who'd given up his Friday night to play guardian angel. Everyone deserves a second chance. That's what my dad taught me. Doesn't matter if they've earned it or not. You give it because that's who you choose to be. Diane moved toward him, and for a terrible moment, Ryan thought she might hug him. An intimacy that would shatter whatever professional boundary still existed between them. But she stopped just out of reach, hands clasped in front of her like a penitent in church. I don't deserve your kindness, Mitchell. I've been cruel, deliberately cruel. I resented you for having a daughter who needed you because it reminded me of what I'd lost. Every time you asked for time off, every school event you wanted to attend, it felt like an accusation. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. I punished you for being a good father because I couldn't be a good daughter anymore. My mother was dead, and you still had someone to love and protect, and I hated you for it. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Ryan had suspected some of this, had sensed that Diane's hostility toward him specifically went beyond normal workplace dynamics. But hearing it said aloud, stripped of pretense, was different. It transformed 3 years of resentment into something more complex. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. I should go. My daughter's waiting. Your daughter. Diane repeated the words as if testing their weight. Emma, right? The one whose school play I wouldn't let you attend 3 months ago. Ryan was surprised she remembered. Surprised she'd even registered Emma's name through the haze of work demands and deliberate detachment. Yeah, she's 8. Smart as hell and twice as perceptive. I'm sorry, Mitchell. Diane's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm sorry for all of it. For being the reason she doesn't see her father enough. For making you choose between your mom and your daughter when no parent should ever have to make that choice. Ryan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Apologies from drunk people rarely survive the sobering light of morning. Diane would wake up tomorrow with a hangover and remembered shame, and Monday morning would probably bring the same ice queen who'd made his life hell for 3 years. That was how these things went. Powerful people didn't change overnight. They didn't suddenly develop empathy because one person showed them kindness in their darkest moment. Do you have aspirin? Water? Diane pointed to a bathroom off the main living area. Ryan found both, setting them on her nightstand along with a fresh glass of water. The bedroom matched the rest of the apartment, expensively impersonal. The bed so perfectly made and it looked like it had never been slept in. Get some rest, drink the water, take the aspirin. He turned to leave, but Diane's voice stopped him. Mitchell, thank you for everything. Ryan looked back. She'd sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her stained blouse, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd ever imagined Diane Harper could look. Get some sleep, Ms. Harper. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. Carlos was still at his post, and he gave Ryan a knowing nod as he passed through the lobby. You're a good man helping her like that. just doing what anyone would do. Most people wouldn't. Most people would have let her drown. The night had turned properly cold. Ryan walked the 6 blocks to where he'd parked, needing the air and movement to process everything that had happened. The city at midnight on a Friday was a different animal than daytime Manhattan, louder, wilder, full of people chasing pleasure or oblivion or something in between. Ryan felt disconnected from all of it, wrapped in the strange bubble of having witnessed his boss at her most broken. His car started with the reliable rumble that had become comforting over the years. 15 years old, 180,000 miles, but it ran. That was enough. Ryan pulled into traffic and pointed toward Queens, toward home, toward Emma and normalcy, and the life he'd built from the wreckage of his marriage. The drive gave him time to think about Diane's confession, her mother, the photograph on the refrigerator, about how people dealt with loss in such radically different ways. Ryan had thrown himself into being the best father possible after Rachel left, transforming his pain into purpose. Diane had thrown herself into being the best CEO possible after her mother died, transforming her pain into armor. Neither approach was wrong. Neither was entirely right. They were just 2 humans doing their best to survive in a world that kept taking pieces of them. The streets of Queens welcomed him with their familiar chaos, bodegas still open, groups of teenagers hanging on corners, the comfortable disorder of a neighborhood where people actually lived rather than just invested. Ryan parked in his building's lot, taking the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor. Mrs. Patterson was reading on his couch, Emma asleep in her bedroom. The older woman looked up as Ryan entered, marking her place with a finger. "Everything all right?" Ryan sank into the armchair, suddenly too tired to maintain his usual careful composure. "I don't know, Agnes. I really don't know." "The person you helped?" "My boss, the one Emma calls the Dragon Lady. She was drunk and falling apart because her mother died 5 years ago today." Mrs. Patterson set her book aside, giving Ryan her full attention. She'd been a therapist before retiring, and sometimes that professional insight leaked through in the way she listened. Completely present, judgment-free. "And you went anyway, even though she's made your life difficult." "Couldn't not go. That's not how my dad raised me." Mrs. Patterson smiled, the expression carrying both approval and a touch of sadness. "Your father would be proud, but don't forget to protect yourself too, dear. Kindness is admirable, but it can't fix everyone. Some people aren't ready to be helped." Ryan knew she was right, knew that Monday morning would probably bring disappointment when Diane reverted to form. But sitting here in his worn armchair, thinking about that photograph on her refrigerator and the raw pain in her voice when she talked about her mother, Ryan couldn't quite believe that the transformation was impossible. After Mrs. Patterson left, Ryan checked on Emma. She was sprawled across her bed, covers kicked off, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3. He pulled the blanket back over her, kissed her forehead, and stood for a moment just watching her breathe. This was what mattered. Not promotions or client accounts, or whether his boss appreciated his sacrifice. Just this, a safe child, a warm home, another day of being exactly what Emma needed him to be. In his own room, Ryan lay in the darkness and thought about the evening's strange journey, about Diane's apartment, so cold despite its expensive perfection, about the way she'd looked at him when he took the phone from her hand, like he was performing a miracle rather than just basic human decency. About Robert Chen's voice on the other end, offering what might have been an opportunity or might have been a test. Most important moments in life don't announce themselves. His father had said that constantly, usually while doing something that seemed mundane at the time, helping a stranger change a tire, listening to a neighbor's problems over coffee, small acts that rippled outward in ways you couldn't predict or control. Tonight had been one of those moments. Ryan felt it with bone-deep certainty. Something had shifted between him and Diane Harper, some fundamental recalibration of their relationship that couldn't be undone. Whether that shift led somewhere positive or just created new complications remained to be seen. But as sleep finally claimed him, Ryan wasn't thinking about Monday or consequences or professional implications. He was thinking about a photograph on a refrigerator, 2 women smiling like happiness was simple before grief taught them otherwise. And he was thinking about his daughter's wisdom. Even dragons deserve kindness, maybe especially dragons. Ryan woke Saturday morning to Emma jumping on his bed, a tradition she'd maintained since she was 4, despite his half-hearted protests. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting her face in gold. "Daddy, you're home! Was the dragon lady okay?" He pulled her down into a hug, breathing in strawberry shampoo and the unique scent of his daughter, grass and markers and hope. "She was having a really hard night, kiddo, but she's home safe." "Did you slay the dragon?" Ryan thought about Diane's tear-streaked face, her broken apologies, the way she'd looked at her mother's photograph with such raw longing. "No, Em, turns out she wasn't really a dragon at all, just a person who forgot how to be one for a while." Emma considered this with her usual seriousness. Maybe she just needed someone to remind her. Children, Ryan thought, understood things adults spent years unlearning. Maybe that was the real tragedy, not that people became dragons, but that they forgot they'd ever been anything else. The weekend passed in its usual rhythm. Grocery shopping, park visits, hours spent at the Astoria Library where Emma devoured books faster than Ryan could keep track. Sunday afternoon, they made pancakes together, the kitchen filling with smoke when Ryan misjudged the heat, and Emma laughed so hard she nearly fell off her step stool. These were the moments that mattered. Not Friday night's drama, not Monday's uncertain future, just flour on Emma's nose and the comfortable chaos of their small life. But underneath the normalcy, Ryan's mind kept returning to Diane's apartment. That photograph, the emptiness of expensive spaces meant to house a life but instead just storing existence. He wondered if she was awake yet, whether the hangover had hit, whether she remembered everything she'd said. Sunday night, after Emma was in bed, Ryan sat at his kitchen table with the manuscript of the children's book he'd been writing. 2 years of stolen moments, paragraphs written between bedtime stories and work emails. The story of a princess who befriends a dragon everyone else fears, discovering that the monster was just lonely and misunderstood. He'd written it for Emma, of course. But looking at the pages now, Ryan realized he'd also been writing about Diane Harper without knowing it. About how hurt people. About second chances and the courage it takes to see past someone's armor to the wounded human underneath. The final chapter remained unfinished. He'd struggled with the ending for months, unable to decide how the story should resolve. Tonight, the words finally came. The princess doesn't slay the dragon or domesticate it. She just sits with it until the dragon remembers it used to be capable of warmth. That's all transformation ever is. The slow, painful process of remembering who you were before the world taught you to breathe fire. Ryan wrote until midnight, finishing the book at last. He'd print it tomorrow, bind it himself at the copy shop. Emma's 9th birthday was still 2 months away, but the gift was finally ready. As he climbed into bed, exhausted but satisfied, Ryan's phone buzzed with an email notification. Diane Harper, sent at 11:47 p.m. Against his better judgment, he opened it. "Mitchell, I remember everything from Friday night. All of it. I want you to know that. We need to talk Monday morning. 9 a.m., my office. DH." No apology, no explanation. Just the stark acknowledgement that she hadn't blacked out, hadn't conveniently forgotten her vulnerability or his kindness. Whatever happened Monday morning, it wouldn't be a return to their old dynamic. That much was certain. Ryan set his phone aside and closed his eyes. Across the city, in a penthouse apartment overlooking Manhattan, Diane Harper sat at her kitchen counter, staring at her mother's photograph. She'd spent the weekend in a fog of hangover and self-recrimination, reviewing every moment of Friday night with the merciless clarity of sobriety. Most people she knew would pretend it never happened, would show up Monday morning and maintain the fiction that nothing had changed. That was the professional thing to do, the safe thing. But Diane had made a promise to her mother's photograph, a promise to stop being the person grief had made her and start becoming the person Maria Harper had raised. It would mean dismantling 3 years of carefully constructed armor. It would mean admitting she'd been wrong about almost everything. It would mean acknowledging that Ryan Mitchell, the employee she'd dismissed and diminished, had shown her more grace in one night than she'd shown anyone in 5 years. Monday morning would change everything. Diane didn't know exactly what that change would look like, but sitting in her empty apartment, looking at her mother's smile, she knew she couldn't go back, wouldn't go back. The Ice Queen had melted, and the woman left behind had to figure out how to be human again. That journey would start with 2 cups of coffee, one black with a single sugar, brought to a creative director's desk by a CEO who'd never bothered to learn how her employees took their coffee until one of them showed her what kindness looked like at 2 in the morning. Monday morning arrived with the chaos that defines single parenthood. Emma spilled orange juice across the kitchen table while searching for her math homework, and Ryan burned toast while trying to answer an email from a junior designer. By the time they made it to the school bus stop, they were both breathless, and Emma's shirt had a stain shaped like Florida. The subway commute gave Ryan time to replay Diane's email for the 100th time. 9 a.m., her office. No context beyond acknowledgement that she remembered. He'd spent Sunday night oscillating between hope and dread, unable to settle on which emotion was more appropriate for whatever awaited him. Harper and Associates occupied the 12th floor of a Madison Avenue building that smelled perpetually of expensive coffee and ambition. Ryan emerged from the elevator at 9:15, already late because Emma had missed the first bus, and he'd driven her to school himself. The guilt of tardiness warred with the knowledge that this morning, of all mornings, showing up flustered and 15 minutes behind schedule was exactly the wrong message to send. The office hummed with its usual Monday energy. Sarah from account management waved from her desk. Marcus, the junior designer Ryan mentored, looked up from his screen with a grin that suggested weekend adventures Ryan didn't want to hear about. Everything appeared normal. The same fluorescent lighting, the same whiteboards covered in campaign ideas, the same corporate landscape Ryan had navigated for 3 years. Except Diane Harper stood beside his desk holding 2 coffee cups. The office didn't exactly stop. People were too professional for that. But the energy shifted. Conversations continued at lower volumes. Eyes tracked this unprecedented scene while pretending not to. Jennifer from HR paused mid-stride, her expression caught between confusion and concern. Diane looked like herself again. Hair pulled into its characteristic bun, navy suit tailored to perfection, makeup applied with the precision of someone who understood presentation as warfare. But her eyes carried something different. Uncertainty, maybe, or determination wearing the mask of composure. "Good morning, Ryan," his first name. In 3 years, she'd never used it. Always Mitchell, delivered with the clinical detachment of a label on a specimen jar. "I got you coffee. Black with 1 sugar, right?" Ryan's mouth went dry. She'd remembered, not just the fact that he drank coffee, but the specific way he took it. A detail she'd observed over 3 years of staff meetings and early morning strategy sessions without ever acknowledging she'd noticed. "Thank you." The words came out more tentative than he'd intended, colored by suspicion that this might be some elaborate setup for a different kind of confrontation. "I'd like to speak with you in my office when you have a moment." The request carried none of its usual commanding weight, an invitation rather than a summons. Ryan followed her through the maze of desks, acutely aware of every eye tracking their progress. Tom from Senior Accounts Management raised his eyebrows in a question Ryan couldn't answer. Sarah mouthed something that looked like, "What's happening?" and Ryan could only shrug. Diane's office occupied the corner with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan grid. Ryan had been here countless times for reviews and project discussions, always standing on the wrong side of her massive desk, while she delivered critiques with surgical precision. Today she closed the door and gestured to the chair across from her before sitting, a small shift in power dynamics that felt monumental. "I remember everything about Friday night. I want you to know that up front." Ryan set his coffee on her desk, buying time to formulate a response. The acknowledgement felt like standing on the edge of something dangerous, a precipice where the wrong words could send them both tumbling. "It's really not necessary to—" "It is necessary." Diane opened a manila folder and Ryan recognized his personnel file. "I spent the weekend reviewing this. 3 years of consistently excellent performance. Award-winning campaigns, mentorship of junior staff that's produced some of our best young talent, client feedback that specifically mentions your name as a reason they stay with us." She looked up, and Ryan saw something in her expression he'd never witnessed before. Shame, maybe, or the kind of self-awareness that came from seeing yourself through someone else's eyes and hating what you found. "And I've denied you flexible hours, passed you over for promotion twice, made your life deliberately difficult because—" Her voice caught, and she paused to collect herself. "Because you had what I'd lost. A family that needed you. A daughter who made you leave the office at reasonable hours. A life outside these walls that reminded me I'd stopped having one. The confession landed between them like something physical. Ryan thought about Friday night, about Diane sobbing in her sterile apartment, about the photograph of her mother that represented everything she'd buried under professional achievement. My behavior has been inexcusable, professionally and personally. I've been taking my grief out on others, especially you, and it stops today. She pushed the folder across the desk. Inside, Ryan saw documentation he didn't fully understand. HR forms, salary schedules, org charts with his name moved to a different position. Effective immediately, you're promoted to Senior Creative Director. 40% salary increase. Flexible working hours that actually mean flexible. Leave at 3 for Emma's pickup. Work from home when she's sick. No more guilt trips about being a present father. Full autonomy over your projects and direct report only to me. Ryan stared at the papers, unable to process the words quickly enough to form coherent thoughts. 40%. That was, he did the math automatically, an extra $30,000 a year. Enough to move to a better neighborhood. Enough for Emma's college fund to become real instead of aspirational. Enough to stop choosing between new winter coats and keeping the heat above 65 degrees. I don't understand. Why now? Diane's hands folded on the desk, fingers interlaced with the kind of precision that suggested she'd practiced this conversation in her mirror. Because you deserve it. You deserved it 3 years ago, and I denied you out of spite and pain and 100 other emotions I took out on you instead of dealing with them myself. I can't undo those 3 years, Mitchell. Ryan. But I can start making it right today. The use of his first name, even corrected mid-sentence, felt like watching someone learn a new language. Uncertain but committed to the effort. I punished you for having what I lost. Every time you mentioned your daughter, every time you asked for time to be a father, it felt like you were rubbing my face in the fact that my mother was gone and I'd never get that relationship back. So I made you pay for having love in your life when mine had been ripped away. Ryan thought about his father's lessons, about kindness as a choice rather than a response to earned behavior, about second chances and the courage it took to both offer and accept them. Robert Chen is coming in this afternoon. I want you to lead the meeting. Prove to yourself and to him that you're ready for this position. And if I fail, you won't. I've been holding you back, not because you lack the skills, but because acknowledging your talent meant acknowledging my own failures as a leader and a human being. Ryan's phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it, some reflex from years of training under Diane's regime where personal interruptions during meetings were cardinal sins. It vibrated again and again. Answer it. Diane's voice carried none of its usual edge, just tired permission. Ryan pulled out his phone. 3 texts from Emma's school. The preview of the first made his stomach drop. Emma has a fever of 101.5. I have to go pick up my daughter. The old Diane would have launched into a lecture about commitment and priorities. Would have made him feel the weight of choosing his child over his career, even as she claimed to support work-life balance. Ryan braced for it automatically, a flinch response from 3 years of conditioning. Of course you do. Take the rest of the day. Is there anything you need? The question was so unexpected that Ryan just stared at her for a moment, recalibrating his understanding of their interaction. No, I think we'll be okay. I meant what I said, Ryan. Things are going to be different here. He nodded, already mentally calculating the fastest route to Emma's school, whether Mrs. Patterson was home to help once he got Emma settled. The promotion documents remained on Diane's desk, surreal and untouched. We'll talk more about this tomorrow, whenever you're ready. Emma comes first. Ryan left the office in a daze, grabbing his jacket from his desk while Sarah and Tom peppered him with questions he couldn't answer. The elevator ride down felt like descending from one reality into another, from a world where Diane Harper brought coffee and offered promotions into the familiar chaos of single parenthood, where fevers and school nurses trumped every professional consideration. Emma's school was in Astoria, 20 minutes in light traffic. Ryan made it in 15, breaking probably half a dozen traffic laws and not caring. The nurse's office smelled like antiseptic and graham crackers. Emma sat on the vinyl bed looking small and miserable, her face flushed with fever. Daddy, Her voice carried the particular quality of sick children everywhere, simultaneously brave and on the verge of tears. Ryan signed her out, carried her to the car despite her protest that she was too old for that. At home, he settled her on the couch with water and children's Tylenol, blankets piled around her like a nest. She fell asleep almost immediately, and Ryan sat on the floor beside the couch with his laptop, trying to work while monitoring her breathing. An email from Diane arrived at 3 p.m. Hope Emma feels better. No rush on anything work-related. Take care of your daughter. No passive-aggressive subtext, no suggestion that he was letting the team down. Just straightforward human concern that felt more alien than kindness from a stranger would have. Ryan responded with a simple thank you, then closed his laptop. Work could wait. Everything could wait except the small person breathing heavily on his couch, her forehead still too warm under his hand. By Wednesday, Emma's fever had broken, but the school nurse recommended keeping her home another day. Ryan worked from his kitchen table while Emma colored at the other end, creating elaborate scenes of dragons and princesses that she narrated with the seriousness of a documentary filmmaker. His phone rang at 2 p.m. Diane Harper. Ryan braced himself for the inevitable, that the understanding had limits, that she'd decided Ryan was taking advantage, that the old dynamic was reasserting itself. Ryan, how's Emma? Better, fever's gone, just needs another day to fully recover. Good. Listen, I wanted to ask, and please say no if it's overstepping, but I'd like to visit this weekend. Bring her some soup, my mother's recipe. The request was so unexpected that Ryan forgot to respond for several seconds. I know I have no right to insert myself into your personal life, but I've been thinking about Emma, about how she must see me. The dragon lady who keeps her father away from school events. I'd like her to know I'm trying to be better. Ryan thought about a Friday night, about Diane's empty apartment and the photograph of her mother, about Emma's wisdom regarding dragons who just needed someone to be kind to them. Sunday afternoon, we'll be home. Thank you, I'll text before I come. Sunday arrived with autumn sunshine that turned Queens into something almost beautiful. Ryan cleaned the apartment with more care than usual, not because he was trying to impress Diane, but because some instinct demanded that his space be presented as intentionally chosen rather than economically necessary. Emma helped, her recovery complete enough to be invested in the arrival of a mysterious visitor bearing soup. Is the dragon lady really coming? Her name is Ms. Harper, and yes, remember what we talked about? She's had a hard time and she's trying to do better. Like in the book, where the dragon remembers it used to be nice? Exactly like that. The doorbell rang at 2. Diane stood in the hallway wearing jeans and a cream sweater, the first time Ryan had seen her in anything other than a suit or Friday night's disaster. She carried a large tote bag in one hand and a Tupperware container in the other, looking more uncertain than anyone who commanded a marketing empire had any right to look. I hope I'm not intruding. Ryan stepped back to let her enter. Diane's eyes swept across the living room, the thrift store furniture, Emma's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, the comfortable disorder of actual human habitation. Her expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Ryan to catalog, finally settling on something that looked like longing. I brought chicken soup, my mother's recipe. She held up a yellowed index card, and some books I thought Emma might enjoy while she's recovering. Emma appeared in the hallway wearing her favorite purple dress, hair brushed to within an inch of its life, because she'd decided this visitor deserved her best presentation. She stopped when she saw Diane, eyes going wide. Daddy, it's the dragon lady. Ryan wanted the floor to open and swallow him. 3 days of preparation, of explaining that Ms. Harper was trying to be better, and Emma defaulted to the nickname within seconds of meeting her. He opened his mouth to apologize, to smooth over the social catastrophe, but Diane was already laughing. Not the polite laughter of professional networking events. Real laughter, warm and genuine, that transformed her face into something recognizable from the photograph on her refrigerator. Yes, I'm the dragon lady, although I'm trying very hard not to breathe fire anymore. Emma approached with the fearless curiosity of 8-year-olds evaluating interesting strangers. Daddy says you're very smart, but you forgot how to be happy. Ryan closed his eyes. Apparently his private conversations were less private than he'd believed. But when he forced himself to look, Diane had knelt down to Emma's level, bringing her eyes even with the child's. Your daddy's absolutely right. I did forget for a long time, but I'm learning again, partly because of him. Did you really make my daddy sad? The directness of the question would have destroyed most adults. Diane held Emma's gaze without flinching. I did. I was going through something very difficult, and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it. That was wrong of me, and I'm sorry. Emma considered this with visible seriousness. Okay, do you like dragons? I draw them. Just like that, the judgment was rendered and forgiven. Emma took Diane's hand and led her to the coffee table where her latest artistic endeavors were spread. Ryan stood in his own hallway watching his boss, former dragon, current work-in-progress human, sit on his worn couch and examine his daughter's drawings with what appeared to be genuine interest. This one is magnificent. The detail on the scales is impressive. Emma beamed, and Ryan's heart did something complicated in his chest. The afternoon unfolded with a surreal quality. Diane read to Emma from one of the books she'd brought, The Secret Garden, which had been her favorite at Emma's age. Emma curled against Diane's side with the unconscious trust of children who hadn't yet learned to maintain adult boundaries. Ryan watched from the kitchen while pretending to prepare tea, struck by how natural they looked together. How something in Diane's face softened when she read the story, voice taking on warmth and expression that never appeared in board meetings. 20 minutes in, Emma fell asleep against Diane's shoulder. Diane looked at Ryan with an expression of complete uncertainty, as if she'd never encountered a sleeping child and didn't know the protocol. Ryan crossed to them and carefully lifted Emma, carrying her to her bedroom. When he returned, Diane was standing by the refrigerator, looking at Emma's drawings. I didn't know children still made refrigerator art. I thought that was something from when I was young. Emma's a prolific artist. We rotate them monthly or we'd need a much bigger refrigerator. Diane touched one drawing lightly, a princess standing beside a dragon, both smiling. Something about her expression suggested she was seeing more than colored marker on construction paper. Can I help with dishes or anything? The offer was so domestic, so completely divorced from their professional relationship that Ryan almost laughed. Instead, he handed her a dish towel, and they worked in silence for a few minutes. Him washing, her drying, falling into a rhythm that felt older than their 3-year adversarial relationship. Thank you for letting me come. I know I don't deserve access to your personal life after how I've treated you. Ryan rinsed a pot, choosing his words carefully. You asked earlier if people can really change. I think the answer is that they can, but only if they are willing to be uncomfortable. You're being uncomfortable right now in my kitchen, doing dishes. That's growth. Diane set down the plate she'd been drying. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you do it? After your wife left, how did you stay kind instead of becoming bitter? Ryan thought about the months after Rachel's departure, the rage that had consumed him, the nights lying awake imagining confrontations that would never happen. The slow, painful process of deciding what kind of man he wanted Emma to see when she looked at her father. I didn't at first. I was furious. Built walls around Emma and myself, decided love wasn't worth the risk. He dried his hands on a towel. But Emma needed more than just survival. She needed to see that being hurt doesn't mean you stop being human. So I had to make a choice, let Rachel's abandonment turn me into someone I didn't recognize, or use it as an opportunity to become someone better. The choice is entirely yours. Diane repeated the words like she was testing their weight. My mother used to say that, before she got sick, before I watched her suffer. She'd say hardship makes you bitter or better, and the choice is entirely yours. They'd migrated to the kitchen table without Ryan quite noticing, 2 cups of tea cooling between them. Diane's fingers traced patterns on the worn surface. When she died, I chose bitter. Told myself that being hard would protect me from ever hurting that much again. Instead, I hurt everyone around me and called it strength. You can choose differently now. Can I, after 3 years of being someone Emma calls the Dragon Lady? After making you choose between your career and your daughter over and over? Her voice carried genuine doubt. Don't transformations require more than just deciding to change? Ryan thought about the manuscript in his desk drawer, about princesses and dragons and the slow process of remembering warmth. Transformation isn't an event. It's 1,000 small decisions, made over and over, especially when it would be easier to revert to what's familiar. You're making those decisions. The coffee Monday morning. Coming here today. That's what change looks like, uncomfortable and awkward, and nothing like the dramatic reveal in movies. Diane's laugh was soft and self-deprecating. I brought you coffee and soup, hardly heroic transformation. And you remembered how I take my coffee. You asked about Emma instead of just demanding I return to work. You're sitting in my kitchen on a Sunday when you could be anywhere else. Ryan met her eyes across the table. Those aren't small things, not to me. The silence that followed felt different from the awkward pauses that had characterized their relationship before. Comfortable, maybe, or at least moving in that direction. I should go. Let Emma rest. Let you have your Sunday back. At the door, Diane paused with her tote bag over her shoulder. Ryan, I know I keep saying this, but thank you for Friday night, for today, for not giving up on the possibility that I could be better than I've been. Everyone deserves a second chance. I'm just grateful you're taking yours. After she left, Ryan found Emma awake in her room, supposedly resting but actually reading one of the books Diane had brought. Daddy? Yeah, kiddo. I like her, the dragon lady. She's not scary like we thought. Ryan sat on the edge of Emma's bed, brushing hair back from her forehead. People are usually more complicated than the stories we tell about them. Is she going to be around more? I don't know. Would you like that? Emma considered the question with her characteristic seriousness. She seems lonely, like she needs people but doesn't know how to ask for them. 8 years old and somehow wiser than most adults Ryan knew. He kissed Emma's forehead and left her to her book, returning to his own space with a head full of thoughts he couldn't quite organize. Something had shifted today, not dramatically, but fundamentally. Diane Harper had stepped into his world and shown genuine interest in being part of it. Had sat on his couch and read to his daughter and done dishes in his kitchen like those were normal activities for a CEO on a Sunday afternoon. The impossibility of their situation pressed against Ryan's awareness. She was still his boss. The promotion she'd offered was still contingent on navigating a professional relationship that had fundamentally changed in ways neither of them fully understood. And beneath all of that lurked the dangerous awareness that Diane Harper, without her armor, was someone Ryan could imagine caring about in ways that had nothing to do with hierarchies or paychecks. That path led to complications he couldn't afford. Emma needed stability, not her father navigating a romance with his boss. His career needed the promotion and what it represented, not the chaos of personal entanglement. Better to appreciate Diane's transformation at a safe distance, to be grateful for improved working conditions without mistaking gratitude for something more. But that night, lying in bed, Ryan kept returning to the image of Diane reading to Emma. The warmth in her voice, the way she looked at his daughter's drawings like they were gallery-worthy art. The question she'd asked about people really changing, and the hope underneath that suggested she desperately wanted the answer to be yes. Sometimes the most important moments don't announce themselves. His father's wisdom echoing again. They just arrived, disguised as ordinary Sunday afternoons, and only later do you realize they were pivot points where everything shifted direction. Monday morning, Ryan returned to the office with Emma back in school and his own equilibrium somewhat restored. The promotion papers sat in an envelope on his desk with a note in Diane's handwriting. No pressure, whenever you're ready to sign. The lack of pushiness felt as revolutionary as everything else about her recent behavior. Tom caught Ryan at the coffee machine, voice low with curiosity. What the hell happened between you and Harper? She's been acting like a different person. Actually said good morning to me this morning. Good morning, with eye contact and everything. Ryan shrugged, unwilling to betray Diane's confidence about Friday night or Sunday's visit. Maybe she's just trying to be a better boss. Nobody just becomes a better boss overnight, especially not Ice Queen Harper. Tom's eyes narrowed with speculation. Did something happen? Some kind of leverage? No leverage, just a person deciding to change. Tom looked skeptical but dropped it, and Ryan returned to his desk with a sense of relief. Whatever was happening between him and Diane didn't need to become office gossip fuel. The week proceeded with a strange new rhythm. Diane's transformation wasn't perfect. She still had moments where the old sharpness surfaced, where frustration with a junior designer's work made her voice cut like glass. But now she caught herself. Apologize. Rephrase criticism as constructive guidance instead of personal attack. The entire office noticed, conversations in break rooms speculating about everything from divine intervention to alien body snatchers. Friday afternoon, Ryan found an email from Diane with the subject line, "Emma's birthday? I saw in your file that Emma turns 9 next month. I wanted to ask if I could give her something. No pressure or obligation. I just thought she might enjoy a book that meant a lot to me at her age. Let me know if that would be appropriate. Under DH." Ryan stared at the email for a full minute. Diane Harper had looked up Emma's birthday, had thought about her enough to want to give her a gift, had asked permission instead of just doing it. The consideration underlying each element felt more significant than the gesture itself. That would be really nice. Emma would love that. Sunday, as promised, Diane appeared at their door with a wrapped package. Emma tore into it with birthday enthusiasm despite the actual day being weeks away. Inside was a first edition of The Secret Garden, its cover worn and pages yellowed with age. On the inside cover, an inscription in fading ink. "For my darling Diane, always believe in magic. With all my love, Mom." Emma read it aloud, then looked up at Diane with sudden understanding. "This was yours, from your mom." "It was, and now I'd like you to have it, if that's okay." Emma hugged Diane with the fierce enthusiasm of children who haven't learned about personal space or emotional restraint. Diane's arms came up slowly, uncertainly, before wrapping around Emma and holding on like she was anchoring herself to something solid. Ryan watched them and thought about second chances, about dragons learning to be warm again, about how sometimes the most transformative relationships began with a desperate phone call at midnight and a willingness to answer despite every reason not to. October arrived with the kind of weather that made New York bearable. Crisp mornings that promised eventual warmth, leaves turning gold in the small parks scattered through Queens. Ryan's life had settled into a rhythm that felt simultaneously foreign and right. The promotion meant leaving work at 3 most days to pick up Emma from school. It meant laptops on kitchen tables instead of late nights at the office. It meant salary increases that transformed maybe into yes when Emma asked if they could afford dance classes. Diane's transformation continued in fits and starts. She'd snap at a junior account manager about missed deadlines, then spend 20 minutes apologizing and helping them create better systems. The office watched this evolution with the fascination of people witnessing something they'd never believed possible. Jennifer from HR pulled Ryan aside one afternoon with questions that weren't quite accusations about what had changed, what he'd done, whether Diane needed professional support. Ryan deflected with practiced vagueness, protecting Diane's privacy about Friday night because that story wasn't his to tell. The Tech Vision presentation happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Robert Chen arrived with 2 members of his executive team, and Ryan led them through campaign concepts he'd developed during Emma's sick days. Diane sat at the conference table but said nothing, letting Ryan command the room in a way she'd never permitted before. Chen signed a contract for expanded services worth $12 million over 2 years. Afterwards, he shook Ryan's hand with genuine warmth. "This is what I've been waiting to see from Harper & Associates. Keep this up, and we'll be talking about a lot more than marketing campaigns." Diane waited until Chen left before approaching Ryan's desk. "You were brilliant in there. Natural leadership. I had a good teacher. Eventually." The joke earned a smile that reached her eyes. Small victories, Ryan thought. Transformation measured in moments rather than grand gestures. November brought colder weather and an unexpected invitation. Diane appeared at Ryan's desk on a Thursday with the kind of hesitancy that still looked strange on her face. "Emma mentioned she likes museums. The Natural History Museum has a new dinosaur exhibit opening Saturday. I thought, if you're both free, maybe we could go together." Ryan considered the implications. Spending weekend time with his bum crossed boundaries that professional relationships typically maintained. But Diane wasn't just his boss anymore. She was someone fighting to become a better version of herself, and Emma genuinely liked her presence. Emma would love that. Saturday morning, they met outside the museum's entrance. Emma wore her purple dress again and had insisted Ryan help her braid her hair. Diane appeared in jeans and a green jacket, looking younger without the armor of professional attire. The 3 of them moved through exhibits like a unit Ryan hadn't planned to create, pointing out facts, reading placards, Emma bouncing between them with questions neither adult could always answer. Why did all the dinosaurs die at once? Diane knelt beside Emma in front of a Triceratops skeleton. The scientists think a huge asteroid hit the Earth and changed everything so fast that the dinosaurs couldn't adapt. Sometimes change comes whether we're ready for it or not. The words hung in the air with weight beyond their surface meaning. Ryan caught Diane's eye over Emma's head, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or acknowledgement of their own asteroid impact. A drunk phone call that had changed everything before either of them was prepared. Lunch was ice cream from a cart outside, eaten on museum steps while Emma recounted her favorite parts. Diane listened with attention that didn't feel performative, asking follow-up questions, laughing at Emma's dramatic interpretations of prehistoric battles. Ryan watched them together and felt something dangerous taking root in his chest. Not just gratitude for improved working conditions, something warmer and more complicated that had no business existing between an employee and his boss. December arrived with the kind of cold that made Queens feel like a different planet. Ryan finished Emma's birthday book one evening after she'd gone to sleep, binding the pages himself at a copy shop in Astoria. The story of the princess and the dragon who learned to be warm again felt less fictional now that he'd watched Diane's transformation unfold in real time. Christmas shopping on a Saturday took them through crowds of desperate last-minute buyers. Emma dragged Ryan through toy stores with the determined focus of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. They emerged into winter darkness with bags full of purchases that would need to be hidden until Christmas morning. Emma was chattering about her wish list when Ryan's phone rang. Diane's name on the screen sent a small jolt through him. Weekend calls still carried echoes of Friday night emergencies. "Ryan, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to ask if you and Emma would like to have dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just I've been practicing my mother's lasagna recipe, and I'd like to share it with people who won't judge if it's terrible." The vulnerability in her voice made the decision easy. We'd love that. Diane's apartment had changed since that first night. Personal photographs now occupied the shelves. Pictures of her mother, of Diane as a child, of moments before grief had hollowed her out. The sterile whiteness had been interrupted with color. Throw pillows in deep red, a painting that actually looked like something rather than abstract expense. The space was becoming a home instead of a showcase. Emma helped Diane in the kitchen while Ryan set the table, and the three of them moved around each other with surprising ease. The lasagna was imperfect, slightly burned at the edges, cheese not quite melted all the way through, but it tasted like effort and care. Emma declared it the best lasagna she'd ever had with the enthusiasm of someone whose palate was still forming. After dinner, Emma fell asleep on Diane's couch during a movie they'd put on. Ryan carried her to the guest bedroom Diane had prepared with sheets printed with stars, then returned to find Diane cleaning up the kitchen with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she needed the activity. "Thank you for coming, for letting me be part of your Saturdays." Ryan dried dishes she handed him, falling back into the rhythm they'd established that first Sunday in his kitchen. Emma loves spending time with you, and honestly, so do I." Diane's hands stilled in the soapy water. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. When your wife left, Rachel, how long did it take before you trusted that someone else might stay?" The question pierced through casual conversation into territory they'd been dancing around for weeks. Ryan set down the dish he'd been drying. "I'm still working on it, if I'm honest. Emma and we built something solid after Rachel left. Adding anyone else to that equation feels like inviting the possibility of more loss." "So you don't date?" "Haven't since the divorce. Seemed easier to focus on Emma and avoid the risk." Diane pulled the drain plug, watching water spiral away. "I haven't dated in 5 years. Since my mother got sick, I've used grief as an excuse to avoid connection. Told myself I was too busy, too focused on work, She paused, searching for the right word. "Too broken to inflict myself on someone else." They'd migrated to her living room, settling on opposite ends of the couch with careful distance between them. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered like a galaxy of lives lived in close proximity. "I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable or asking for things I want instead of demanding them." Diane's voice carried the strain of someone forcing themselves past comfortable boundaries. "But I need you to know that these Saturdays with you and Emma, they're the best part of my week. You've both given me something I didn't know I was missing." Ryan's heart hammered against his ribs. The implication underneath her words was clear enough to be acknowledged or ignored. and ignoring it felt cowardly. Diane, I need to be careful here. Emma's had enough instability. I can't introduce someone into her life who might disappear when things get complicated. I understand, and I'm not asking for anything beyond what we already have. She met his eyes with the kind of courage that came from knowing rejection was possible and speaking anyway. I just wanted you to know that you've changed my life. Both of you. You showed me I could be someone other than the person grief made me, and that's a gift I'll never be able to repay. The moment hung between them, weighted with possibility and restraint. Ryan wanted to close the distance to test whether the warmth between them was real or just gratitude wearing a convincing disguise. But Emma slept in the other room, and morning would bring Monday in the office and all the complications of professional hierarchies. Better to appreciate what they had, friendship, mutual respect, weekend dinners that felt like family, than risk it for something that might shatter under the weight of reality. You've changed our lives too. Emma asks about you constantly. She's never done that with anyone outside our tiny circle. She's an incredible child. You've done an amazing job with her. She'd say the same about you if she knew the word for what you've become to her. January brought snow and Emma's 9th birthday. Ryan threw a small party at their apartment. Mrs. Patterson, a few school friends, chaos and cake, and the comfortable disorder of children celebrating. Diane arrived with the wrapped book she'd promised, and Emma shrieked with delight at the first edition, Secret Garden. The hug she gave Diane lasted long enough for Ryan to see tears forming in Diane's eyes before she blinked them away. After the party wound down and Emma's friends had been collected by parents, Diane stayed to help clean up. Emma, sugar-rushed and exhausted, fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence. Ryan lifted her carefully while Diane collected wrapping paper and paper plates. I should let you have your evening back. Ryan walked her to the door, suddenly unwilling to let the day end. All week he'd been working up courage for something that felt simultaneously necessary and terrifying. Diane, would you want to have dinner sometime? Just the two of us? Her expression shifted through surprise and pleasure before settling on cautious hope. Like a date? I don't know, maybe? Or just two friends getting dinner without an 8-year-old providing commentary? I'd like that very much. They settled on the following Friday, Italian restaurant in the village, small enough to be intimate without feeling like a statement. Ryan spent the week alternating between anticipation and dread, wondering if he was making a catastrophic mistake that would destabilize everything they'd built. The restaurant was warm brick and candlelight, checked tablecloths, and the smell of garlic bread. Diane wore a blue dress that Ryan had never seen, hair down instead of pulled back. Without the context of work or Emma's presence, they existed in unfamiliar territory. I haven't done this in so long, I've forgotten what normal first date conversation looks like. Diane's fingers traced patterns on her water glass. We could talk about quarterly projections and client retention. Please don't. I spend enough of my life thinking about work. They ordered wine and pasta, fell into conversation that ranged across topics they'd never explored. Books they'd loved as children, the places they'd dreamed of traveling but never had. Diane's admission that she'd wanted to be a teacher before business school redirected her path. Ryan's confession that he'd imagined being a novelist until fatherhood made steady paychecks non-negotiable. Do you regret it? Giving up the writing dream? Ryan thought about the manuscript in his drawer, about stories told to Emma instead of published for strangers. I regret nothing that gave me Emma. But yeah, sometimes I wonder what might have been if Rachel had stayed and I'd had the luxury of risk. For what it's worth, I've read your campaign copy. You're a better writer than half the people who end up published. The compliment landed with unexpected weight. Diane had criticized his work 1,000 times over 3 years. Praise from her felt earned in a way generic encouragement never could. Can I ask you something? Ryan's courage came from wine and candlelight, and the way Diane was looking at him across the table. Why are you really doing this? The transformation, the effort with Emma, sitting here with me, right now. Diane set down her fork, giving the question the consideration it deserved. Because on the worst night of my life, you showed me what kindness looks like. You had every reason to ignore my call, to let me destroy myself publicly, to enjoy watching the Ice Queen melt. Instead, you came. You saved me professionally and reminded me personally that I could be someone my mother would recognize. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. I'm doing this because you made me believe people can choose to be better than their worst moments. And because spending time with you and Emma makes me feel like I'm finally keeping the promise I made to my mother, to find happiness again instead of drowning in grief. Ryan closed the distance, covering her hand with his. The touch felt significant in a way that transcended physical contact, an acknowledgement of everything unspoken between them. I was terrified to suggest this, terrified of messing up what we've built, of Emma getting attached and then losing someone else, of office complications. Are you still terrified? Absolutely, but less than I am of letting fear keep me from something that might be important. They left the restaurant hours later, walking through the village with no destination in mind. Snow began falling in soft flakes that caught in Diane's hair. She shivered despite her coat, and Ryan pulled her closer without thinking. She fit against his side like she'd been designed for that exact space. I should get back. Mrs. Patterson is with Emma, and she has church early tomorrow. Can I walk you to the subway? They descended into the station with linked hands, waiting on the platform for trains heading in opposite directions. When Ryan's arrived first, Diane kissed him, soft and brief, a promise rather than a conclusion. Thank you for tonight, for taking a chance on someone who spent 3 years being awful to you. Thank you for becoming someone worth taking chances on. February brought a routine that felt like relationship archaeology, carefully uncovering what existed between them without disturbing the foundation. Weekend outings with Emma continued, but now they also included Thursday dinners when Mrs. Patterson watched Emma overnight. Ryan's apartment saw Diane more frequently, and she learned the rhythms of their life, bedtime stories and morning chaos, Emma's preferences in the way Ryan made coffee. March arrived with the first hints of spring, and Emma asking questions that Ryan had been dreading. Daddy, is Diane your girlfriend? They were eating breakfast, Emma demolishing pancakes with the focus of someone fueling for a busy day. Ryan set down his coffee, buying time to formulate an answer. Would that bother you if she was? Emma shrugged with 9-year-old nonchalance. I like her. She makes you smile different than you used to. Different how? Like you're not just pretending to be happy for me. Children saw too much, too. Ryan pulled Emma into a hug that she tolerated for exactly 10 seconds before wriggling free. Yeah, kiddo, I guess she's my girlfriend. Good. Can we have pancakes at her apartment next time? Her kitchen is fancier. Crisis averted with characteristic Emma pragmatism. Ryan texted Diane the news, and her response was a string of emojis that suggested both relief and joy. The ease of it surprised him, how naturally she'd integrated into their lives. How little disruption her presence caused to the careful equilibrium he'd built with Emma. April brought warmer weather and the kind of evening that demanded open windows and longer walks. Ryan was reading in bed when his phone rang. 2 a.m, Diane's name on the screen, and for one terrible moment he was back in September, uncertain what disaster awaited. Ryan, I'm so sorry to wake you, but I didn't know who else to call. What's wrong? I'm at Mount Sinai. I'm fine, but I had a panic attack earlier, and I drove myself to the ER, and now they want to keep me for observation, and I needed to hear a friendly voice. 20 minutes later, Ryan stood in a hospital waiting room, having left Emma with Mrs. Patterson and explicit instructions to call if she woke. Diane sat in a curtained bay wearing a hospital gown, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. An IV line fed fluids into her arm, monitors tracking vital signs that had apparently stabilized. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous, calling you in the middle of the night for anxiety. Ryan pulled a chair beside her bed, taking her free hand. This isn't ridiculous. You were scared and needed someone. I'm glad you called me. I was thinking about my mother, about how she died in a hospital like this, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was in a vice, and I thought, her voice cracked. I thought I was dying the same way she did. Ryan stayed until 6 when the doctors cleared her for discharge with prescriptions and referrals to therapists who specialized in grief counseling. He drove her home as sunrise painted Manhattan in shades of gold and pink. I'm supposed to be better, fixed, but I'm still such a mess underneath. Being better doesn't mean being perfect. It means knowing when to ask for help instead of drowning alone. Diane leaned her head against the car window. You keep showing up for me, even when it's hard or inconvenient or in the middle of the night. Nobody's done that since my mother died. That's what people do when they care about each other. I love you, Ryan. The words came out quiet but certain. I know that's probably too fast or too much, but sitting in that hospital, I realized I didn't want to waste time being scared of saying it. Ryan pulled up to her building, killing the engine before turning to face her. Carlos the doorman was at his post, discreetly pretending not to notice them. I love you too. You and your panic attacks and your complicated grief and the way you read to Emma like she's the most important audience in the world. They sat in his car as morning traffic began its daily crescendo, holding each other across the center console. The future remained uncertain, office dynamics to navigate, Emma's needs to prioritize, the ever-present risk that things could fall apart. But in that moment, Ryan felt something he hadn't experienced since Rachel left. Hope that wasn't just wishful thinking. May arrived with Emma's dance recital and Diane in the audience beside Ryan, applauding with the enthusiasm of someone who'd claimed space in their family. June brought Emma's last day of third grade and plans for summer that included all three of them, museums and beaches, and the casual domesticity of people building a life together. July was Ryan and Emma at Diane's apartment for dinner when Emma started complaining about stomach pain. Ryan assumed it was too much pasta until Emma's face went white and she doubled over with a cry that sounded nothing like normal discomfort. Diane called 911 while Ryan held Emma, and the paramedics arrived with questions about symptoms and duration. Appendicitis, they suspected. Emergency surgery likely necessary. The ambulance ride to Mount Sinai felt endless. Emma whimpered against Ryan, and he held her while terror clawed at his chest. This was every single parent's nightmare. Serious medical emergency, no backup, the possibility of loss that felt unbearable to contemplate. Diane met them at the hospital, having followed in her car, and her presence beside him felt like oxygen when he'd been drowning. Doctors confirmed appendicitis, prepped Emma for surgery with efficient calm that did nothing to slow Ryan's racing heart. Emma cried as they wheeled her away, calling for him, and Ryan had to be physically restrained from following into the surgical suite. She's going to be fine. The surgery is routine. Ryan paced the waiting room like a caged animal, unable to sit, unable to think beyond the litany running through his head. Please let her be okay. Please, please, please. Diane sat with him through the endless 90 minutes, holding his hand when he needed anchoring, giving him space when he needed to move. When the surgeon finally emerged with news that Emma was fine and recovering, Ryan collapsed into Diane's arms and sobbed with relief so profound it felt like rebirth. They let him see her once she woke in recovery. Emma looked tiny and pale against the hospital bedding, tubes and monitors tracking her return to consciousness. Her eyes opened, found him, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Daddy. Right here, sweetheart. You're okay. You're going to be just fine. Emma's gaze drifted past him to Diane standing in the doorway. You stayed too. Diane approached the bed, touching Emma's hair with infinite gentleness. Of course I stayed. Where else would I be? Emma's question came with the fearless honesty of a child emerging from anesthesia. Are you going to be my new mom? The words hung in the sterile air. Ryan's breath caught. Diane's hand trembled against Emma's forehead. Would you want that, sweetheart? I never had a real mom. Rachel left and I don't remember her much. But you're here. You love Daddy. You make the best cookies. Emma's voice carried the logic of a 9-year-old making sense of her world. Will you stay forever? Diane looked at Ryan over Emma's bed, eyes bright with tears. If your dad wants me to. Ryan found his voice past the emotion choking his throat. We want you to stay. Both of us. Emma drifted back to sleep, her hand still holding Diane's. Ryan and Diane stood on either side of her bed, their fingers intertwined across the small body that had become the center of both their worlds. In the hallway, while Emma slept off the anesthesia, Ryan pulled Diane close. She folded into him with the trust of someone who'd finally stopped running from connection. She asked the question I've been afraid to. Ryan's voice was rough with emotion. Are you going to be her new mom? If you'll let me, if you both want that. We want that. We want you. Not someday or eventually. Now. All of it. 3 months later, on a Friday evening in October, Ryan took Diane back to the Velvet Lounge. Marcus, the bartender, recognized them immediately, grinning as he gestured to the same booth where everything had started. "You two look a hell of a lot better than last time." Ryan proposed with a modest ring and words about second chances. Diane said yes before he'd finished asking. They married in the spring with Emma as their flower girl, bought a house in Forest Hills with a yard big enough for a garden and Diane's mother's photograph on the kitchen wall. A year after the hospital, Ryan found Diane in their kitchen, teaching Emma how to make her mother's lasagna. Flour dusted their noses, laughter filled the spaces between instructions, and through the window he could see the yard where Emma's swing set caught the last of the evening light. Emma looked up, tomato sauce on her chin. "Daddy, Mom says I can help with the garlic." Mom, not Diane, not Ms. Harper, just Mom, said with the casual ownership of a child who'd never doubted she'd be staying. Ryan joined them at the counter, and they worked together with the easy rhythm of people who'd built something permanent from the wreckage of separate broken pieces. Sometimes salvation comes disguised as an inconvenient phone call on a Friday night. Sometimes it arrives through acts of kindness offered without expectation of return. And sometimes, if you are brave enough to answer when wounded people reach out in desperation, you find yourself exactly where you belong, in a kitchen filled with laughter, making dinner with the family you chose and who chose you back.